Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Well done, OP. You did grow up. You learned that thieves aren't to be trusted, that family only matters if they don't abuse your trust, and that cutting toxic people out of your life is sometimes necessary. Holding a grudge against my brother for stealing money from me 16 years ago. I, female 33, have one sibling, an older brother, Dan, male 36. Dan and I never had the closest relationship, even when we were kids. I can't exactly pinpoint why, but it was just the way that it was. Our mom was a single mother, and our dad was in prison serving a long sentence, and only got out when I was 17 and Dan was 20. When we were kids, our mom was working 2 jobs as a housekeeper and as a school lunch lady to make ends meet. We were really broke. As soon as I turned 16, I got a job working in retail to contribute to the household and hopefully save up for university. I was starting to save up quite a sizable amount of money after a year. In that same year, Dan got one of his coworkers pregnant. Shortly after she gave birth, she was hospitalized multiple times with postpartum psychosis and eventually lost all custody of the baby. Dan took custody, so it was me and our mom, Dan, and the baby in a 2-bedroom flat. It was feeling a bit crowded and cluttered, and Dan vented to me many times about how he needs to get his own place. Dan was really struggling for money. He was working a minimum wage job and had all the baby expenses to worry about. When I was 17, Dan stole my debit card and bank details and withdrew all of my savings, which was around $2,000. He put my debit card back in my wallet, then left the house with the baby and moved in with his new girlfriend. I felt so betrayed that he would just take something that I worked so hard for. My mom told me I was forbidden from going to the police about it and told me to just let it go, as Dan's struggling and needed it. When I was old enough to go to university, my dad gave me money to go towards my expenses. I hadn't spoken to Dan since that day, and Dan never attempted to speak to me either. Last week, my mom tried to sneakily get me and Dan to meet up under the guise that we were just getting a normal dinner at a restaurant, and he was in on it. I told him, I don't want to see Dan. Dan told me I need to grow up and I can't hold a grudge over this forever. It was such a long time ago and he was young and desperate, and he's still my brother. He said it's only money and I shouldn't be so materialistic. I told him it's the principle of it, that I'm his little sister and he stole something significant from me. He said I'm dramatizing the situation and that he was in a rough patch and surely I could understand why he did it. No one on the family's on my side here except my dad, and I'm wondering if I really am being so wrong and so cold-hearted. And our second story. Client wants us to create a design exactly like their ugly PowerPoint. We comply. As a designer, I try to educate my clients on design and why something has to be done a certain way. My agency's not cheap, so we make it quite clear that they're paying for our experience and knowledge, not some Photoshop monkey. Most of the time, my clients are appreciative and enjoy the extra guidance and professional advice. Occasionally, we get fun jobs. The sales pitch went well enough. The business owner, Bob, seemed like a decent guy and happy to trust our professional expertise. However, shortly after signing the deal, he brought on a new manager, Karen, who was put in charge of marketing, including the new website we were just contracted to do. It quickly became clear that Karen thought of herself as a multidisciplinary genius and despises us because she thinks she can do better than a professional design agency. Karen loves sending over incomprehensible design instructions and feedback in the form of design mock-ups she creates in PowerPoint. They're as ugly as the devil's butthole after a strong curry. But we try our best to translate the abomination she birthed into good-looking professional design proposals that best reflect the intent of her ideas. Karen didn't like it one bit. Karen was rude, uncooperative, and removed Bob from the email threads when we tried to reach out to him to get his opinion. When we sent over a design, she would complain about how it wasn't what she'd wanted and scream over the phone while our team patiently explained why we couldn't design exactly as she wanted. Mainly, it would be ugly as heck and nobody would want to do business with them with a website like that. The last time Karen complained about how we were stupid morons for not doing what she wanted, we got her on the phone with Bob. She was screaming incomprehensibly and nobody got a word in. Finally, Bob took her side and said, Karen is extremely experienced and knows what she's doing. I want your team to follow every instruction exactly as she asks. No problem. Once again, Karen sent over a ridiculous 70 megabyte PowerPoint. If we followed it exactly, it would look like a website from the 90s with the worst UX ever. We went through every little pixel of her PowerPoint asking her, "So, do you want us to copy this exactly?" To which she would reply with a smug yes. So we documented her instructions down to the letter to cover our butts. Once again, we asked Bob, "Are you sure?" Reply, "Yes, please hurry up and make those changes exactly as she asked." Okie dokie. We copied every ugly font choice, every terrible gradient, every hideous element into the design. We even went the extra mile to export the ugly lopsided shapes she drew as ping graphics so it would all be exactly as she wanted. Then we sent the design over. Here's the design. We've done everything exactly as instructed. Karen once again replied, taking Bob out of the loop, "Perfect. Now, it wasn't so hard to do things exactly as I asked, was it?" We waited. Bob exploded, demanded a meeting the very next day to explain why we were delivering such shoddy work. We go to the meeting, and Karen starts demanding that we propose a completely new design. We presented all past designs, the document in which Karen confirmed she wanted all the changes, the countless emails in which we painstakingly explained to her why her ideas suck, and finally, the last email in which she praised us. You see, Bob, after our last call with you, we had followed Karen's instructions to the letter, exactly as she had asked. She seemed very happy with it. I'm confused why the quick change of heart. I then pull out the contract and calmly point out the portion which stated the number of design proposals we would create. Karen had used up all of it. I'd reminded her that she was limited to X number of proposals, but she clearly didn't remember any of it because she didn't bother reading our emails and would keep talking or yelling over us when she spoke on the phone. I looked Bob in the eye and told him he could either pay extra for each additional new proposal Karen wants or choose from the existing designs done. They asked for some time to discuss privately. We break for coffee. Well, Karen is extremely experienced in this field. We'll go with the last design since it's exactly as she wanted. Even my intern couldn't hold back his surprise. As we drive back to the office, he asks, "Is Karen sleeping with Bob or something? Why does she have him by the balls like that?" I shrug. It's his business and we're getting paid anyway, and he clearly doesn't appreciate our design expertise after all. The less time we spend arguing with them, the more time we could use to focus on my appreciative good clients. We make Bob and Karen sign off on the design and finish up the project quickly. Karen still tries to be difficult, but we stick to the contracted terms, and she couldn't do anything. 2 months after the project ended, I get a call from Bob. He began with some small talk about innocuous project-related business, but I realized it wasn't the purpose of his call. Karen had been fired after making more serious mistakes, causing major losses to his company. He sounded contrite but didn't offer any real apology. That's terrible, Bob. I'm so shocked. I thought Karen was extremely experienced and knew what she was doing. And our next story. My father requests a male nurse, gets more than he bargained for. This took place in the late 70s in a much different time. My father was an ex-military macho 6'4" police officer in California when I was a kid. He was also a sexist homophobe who would yell at the TV about gender-bender movies and gays taking over the world. He had to have emergency surgery on his gallbladder. At this time, this was a much more involved process than it is today. The rest of the story was told to me by my mom because I had to wait outside with my grandma when this happened. They had to put a catheter in right before the process, and my father was uncomfortable having a female nurse do it, so he requested a male nurse. A few moments later, the most flamboyantly gay nurse, or at least he was putting on a show to make my father uncomfortable, burst into the room and in a loud voice announces, "So, you want a male nurse, do you? Well, I can fix you up." My mom said the look on my father's face was pure horror, but he was in utter shock and allowed the nurse to put in the tube. He never spoke of it, but my mom would laugh about it even years later. On a side note, my oldest daughter came out as gay, but as you can imagine, did not want me to tell her grandpa for years. It finally came to the point she was comfortable, and I basically told him he was out of my life. He came by in tears and apologized to her for all the negative things he'd said over the years. He completely changed who he was after and is now part of my life again. He continues to make an effort to be a better person even to this day. It's sad that it took losing his family to change him, but change he did. and for the better. Edit to add, I just want to clear up one small thing. My father's reluctance to have a female nurse work on him was not because of any level of being shy. He was in fact very open and proud and in no way shy in that area. He honestly believed a female nurse would mess it up and felt more comfortable with a man doing it. It's funny because my youngest is in on her final year of medical school and she's going to be a surgeon. Growing up, she was always smart and he would encourage her to someday be a nurse. She would argue with him that she wanted to be a doctor. It was only when she scored 1 point off a perfect ACT test that he finally seemed to realize what he was dealing with. Also, I get the anger at my father. I've spent many years thinking about the things he said and done and why I still have him in my life. I can't justify it. I would imagine anyone with parents around 80 or higher had to deal with this. One extra side note about life experiences. Someone pointed out that once something touched his life, he changed who he was. This is a good point, because while my father was against women and homosexuals, he never once said or did anything racist. Looking back, my father was in the military from around 1959 to 63. When you look at all his old pictures, his best friends and all of them were of multiple racial backgrounds. I honestly think that my father was probably a different man before the military, but having life experiences with different races changed that. I'm really glad he changed for the better. And our last story. Karen freaks out about kids having fun just outside her property. This is more my cousin's story, but she still had to deal with it. She lives in an area that has plenty of nice trees and, annoyingly, an HOA. The area has lots of kids, including her 2 boys, and these kids love hanging out in the wooded area around a particular tree. The guy who lives near this tree helped the kids make the tree more accessible by giving them access to his tools. The kids took this generous opportunity to add boards to the trunk of the tree so they can climb up easier. Soon, Karen moved in near the tree as well. She was not a fan of kids having fun and tore the boards off the tree and hid all the tools in her garage. To make things worse, she took a bunch of large rocks and put them around the tree, then complained to the HOA about the kids. Tool neighbor wasn't thrilled about her taking his tools and told her that the rocks not only were originally on his property, but the tree wasn't even on her property. It was on public property, and the kids were well in their right to play in the tree. So he reported the tools stolen and the tampering of his landscape, aka his rocks. Karen no longer trespasses on the neighbor's property, and the kids continue to play in the tree. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.